all these two-factor authentication login options, should I care about any of them? Should I use any of them? I am a big fan of two-factor authentication. Smartly used. What do I mean by that? I mean, you definitely should use two-factor authentication. There are some cases where it's not really, doesn't matter. You shouldn't use it. It's not worth the overhead. And when I start talking about two-factor authentication, I'm an even bigger fan of actually using a hardware token, not just your cell phone number or anything like that. So let's actually step through that. What do I think are the most the let's step through that. What do I think are the strongest to weakest forms of two-factor auth? Hardware token is the strongest version. Second one would be using something like one-time password, OTP. Those are the numbers you see coming through software like Google Authenticator. I personally prefer LastPass Authenticator mostly because it stores your seeds inside of your encrypted LastPass account, and so you can recover that. It stores your encrypted seeds within your LastPass account, and so multiple devices can come into it and able to get and sync the same authenticator passwords. So that's kind of nice. So I kind of see it as Google Authenticator Plus. That's an open spec, so there's many different softwares to run your OTP. After authenticator software or OTP, you've got email. After email, text message. After that, just the strongest password you can make, and then after that, weak password. So to me, that's really the order of operations there. Notice I have email above text, and that's because phone text messages and the security around that is a little shaky. The ability for something to potentially pretend to be your phone, capture your telephone number's address, get that information that's being texted to you, be able to use that. I just think the emails is a bit more secure than sending text messages. There's a lot of good studies on that. Seeing mini tower cells and things of that nature being stood up in different locations, being able to intercept and transmit various messages. So just at a high level, I tend to prefer email over text, but even then, I go all the way back to the prime two things if I think it needs two-factor auth. Number one, hardware token. Number two, authenticator. If it's not something that really needs one of those two things, then I'm okay with almost any other option just because they're all better than just password. What about biometrics? I'm still not the biggest fan of biometrics. I don't know if I want things taking retina scans, etc. I guess technically, iPhone Face ID is a form of biometric, the fingerprint scanner, etc. Sort of this joke. It's a cruel joke, but it's like if you have biometrics and somebody wants to take something that requires the biometric, then maybe they might want the limb required to do it, right? So if it takes a fingerprint scanner, I don't want to be in the case where they want my finger or my eye or whatever in order to get access to whatever they're trying to get access to. I'd rather that be separate, a thing I hold, a thing I possess, a thing I know, versus what I am. Biometrics aren't bad. I'm not anti-biometrics, but just not my favorite option. Everything does not require two-factor auth. Some of the things that you have to think about is what is the cost of the hack and how easy is it to recover. So, case in point, the thing that I don't really care about two-factor auth for, any of my streaming sites, HBO Max, Netflix, whatever. Like, I just want to have a decently good password, and that's it, right? If something happens, shoot me an email, let me reset my account. Like, if somebody gets access to my Netflix for a week, a day, that I don't care, right? But my bank, I care a bit more there, right? Which is an interesting segue because in my opinion, banks are far behind in their support for two-factor auth. So a specification, FIDO or UTF, browser support for that has gotten quite strong. So hardware tokens are supported natively in browsers because of that. Even if they weren't, most hardware tokens could show up like USB devices and send appropriate strings. So the fact that almost none of my banks, I can't think of a single one. None of my banks support hardware tokens or authentication or authenticator devices. They all support text, email, or calling my phone, right? The only two of those are related to my cell phone, and one of them is my email. But I can't use a physical hardware device for two-factor auth. Actually, the closest thing to a bank that I can think of that supports it is Coinbase, and they only support a hardware token on their website. All right, they don't support it on their mobile app, and so because of that, I have to use the Authenticator app because that I can use Authenticator in both places. So, banks, what are you guys doing? When are you going to have YubiKey support? FIDO, UTF, so anybody, it doesn't have to be YubiKey. All of them work. Actually, I just did a video on hardware wallets. Hardware wallets can act as UTF devices, so they can act as two-factor auth devices as well. So, hey, banks, go ahead and get on it. They preach security with the banks, yada, yada, yada. How do they not support hardware tokens by now for two-factor auth? Okay, and rant. So, long story short is two-factor auth is good. You should use it where you can. You should get hardware keys. You should use a password manager to help you manage good passwords, particularly for having really strong passwords in places that don't support two-factor auth, and secure your password manager with a token. So, I know LastPass supports it where you can have a token and the master password that's super long. You need them both before you get in. Speaking of that, what kind of workflow should you have? If you're doing that, I'd recommend a separate administrative email. That administrative email uses a token and a easily rememberable email, so not the high entropy email, but it uses a two-factor auth for you to get into that email. So that email is your recovery email. So that's your only recovery email allowed to be used. If you want to go really hardcore, no recovery email, obviously you can think of some of the risks associated with doing that. And then from there, everything else stored and managed within your password manager, and as many of those accounts that supports either Authenticator or two-factor auth hardware tokens, you go there. Particularly the things you really care about, right? So not necessarily just everything, but the things where you really have money on the line, things that can cause you significant damage and pain, things where you might spend a lot of time trying to get back into a good state. You can protect those things. So, in conclusion here is, two-factor auth is awesome. Use it. Don't fear it. When you can, go with an Authenticator app or hardware token. And that's it. This should be a lot easier to do nowadays. A lot of the software has come a long way. If you enjoyed this video, we got plenty of content on this channel. Hey, I'm wearing the shirt. We got things related to software development, data science, cryptocurrency, all kinds of things. If you're interested in the technology space, we have the content for you. Curious Tech out.